Welcome back to Wartime Cafe on Free Palestine TV. We are in Barzakh bookstore and cafe shop. We have filmed here many times, but this time we have a special guest visiting from Jordan, artist Suhad Khatib, who was here in Beirut to present her new book. Welcome to Beirut, Suhad. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
It has been the timing of your arrival a surprise. You were set originally, obviously, for touring your book, but you came and it timed with the burial of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the martyr of the nation. I want to speak about your background, but let's start with this moment. You came here to Beirut to present your book, and you also ended up visiting during this funeral. Your impressions, your feelings, sharing this moment with the Lebanese people.
Um, I was supposed to be here on a Tuesday, and we had set the dates a while ago that it was better to do it before Ramadan than after Ramadan because I have other places to be in later, like other cities that I'm visiting. And then I think like a week or two before I was supposed to come to Beirut, the date was set. And I booked my ticket to be able to be in this moment. I just didn't want to arrive after it. I wanted to be in it. I didn't have a very good reason at the time and not to يعني, stay so long because I was also in Baghdad signing my book. But I just felt a calling. I felt like that I needed to be here because honestly, أنا even in my study that I wrote about him, I didn't want to believe that he was gone. I thought maybe I'll come and then he'll surprise us with a khitab and I'll be there for that moment. And I know it's not like a logical reason, but that was the main motivator for me. Um, and I ended up going. It was one of the most difficult and beautiful things at the same time. Um, and I don't know in my generation, and maybe in my parents' generation it's different. I don't know who was the leader that they looked up to, but in my generation, I know there are no leaders, Arab-speaking leaders, that I respect and trust, and felt that I was scared after their passing, and just being in there with everyone, crying it out with everyone. Seeing all these crowds that came out that showed up for him to say goodbye. Part of me was like, Niyalak, I'm Hassan, and all these people love you and love you. They were like, I don't know, I didn't get to make it to the stadium, but I'm assuming that there were millions of people. And whenever there was like no Quran and playing or someone speaking, there was absolute silence, and you can just hear people crying, and it gave you permission to cry as well. Um, when I first got in, because of all these people, I was worried maybe there's going to be a stampede at some point. But everything was just perfect there. Everybody was taking care of everyone. Everybody smelled good. Their eyes are teary, but they're smiling at each other's faces. And I'm here for the same reason that you are here for. And then on my way out, I saw the Palestinian flag, and it just and I it it was bittersweet. And I thought the first 2 hours after the tashiyah, I thought خلص I'm good now. I put it to rest. But it only was for 2 hours, and now I'm back to like but what if he's still around? And I think I don't know. I've been reading Quran and studying it for many years. But now I understand what it means when they say بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون, but they're living but you don't feel it. But and I felt it. I do feel it, and now I know the physical is gone, but the spiritual is still there. And since then, every night when I hang out with friends, whenever we talk, we're only talking about that moment. And I think it's gonna take us a lifetime to understand. And but those are like my thoughts for now. It's something to examine and study for many, many years to come.
You know, usually, as I said, we start with trying to get our audience to know the guest. A lot of the guests, like you, are well known in terms of their output of content and art, but not much is out there about their background that got them to where they are. Suhad, you were born in Muscat, Oman,
Yes.
that which is very unusual for a Palestinian. Your parents are, one is from Al-Lid and the other was from Shwayke in the West Bank. And you did eventually move to Jordan. Tell us about going from Muscat to Jordan and then to the US, this trip, and how your art eventually came to be with this movement from one place to another.
Yes, it's difficult for us Palestinians to talk about our story without getting into the details of our parents' story, because like we're from something and we are going to be something else. So my parents, like you said, one survived the massacre in Lid in 1948, and the other one is from Shwayka Tul Karem, which was eventually taken over in 1967. So there was absolutely no chance for me to ever be born in Palestine. You know, my parents are in exile, therefore I'm going to be born into exile. And both my parents are the first in their family to finish a college education due to the war and all of the things that happened to that generation and the generation before it. So my mom was born in Tulkarem, but she grew up in Saudi, and then she studied in Kuwait, and then she married someone and moved to Oman. So Al Khalij, the Gulf, was like the place where the majority of Palestinians from that generation ended up building their lives and having their children. So me and my brother were born in Oman, Muscat. And I love that for me so much, honestly, because I really, really love Oman. I recently visited it just a few months ago, and I still, like, I'm 47 now, but I still have so many friends there from childhood. People are so kind, they're just sweet people. And I had so much to learn from that place. But since when I was almost 7 or 8, my family chose to move us to Jordan so that we are closer to Palestine, actually. And I think it was one of the good choices, because they're putting me on the path of, like, you're in exile, you have to learn how to live in more than one city. Because I was saying at the book signing the other day that my friend from Nasre sent me a message before my reading, and she was like, "You're so lucky you're in Beirut." I was like, "You're so lucky you're in Palestine." And they take away Palestine from us, and they give us other places like Beirut to be our home until we are ready to go back home, inshallah, collectively. But that's the thing. That's what happens to Palestinians in exile. You have to learn to live in more than one city. You have to learn how to raise your kids in more than one city and keep choosing which is better for your child at this particular time. So I grew up in Amman. I finished school in Amman. I worked after that. But when I was 27, like the majority of my generation, we ended up falling in love with men that don't live in the same city. And that's how I ended up in the US. And about the painting part,
So you went to the US, and originally you used to paint in your youth
yes,
years, but you had stopped painting for a long time.
my first memory of painting, it's very vivid in my head. It was in Oman, which means since I was really, really young, this was like magic to me. And when I was in Amman, my mom used to drive like miles and miles to take me to that one art school in Amman. And the person who was teaching me told my mom, don't bring her to the kids' classes, bring her to the adults' classes. And the youngest person in that class in the afternoon was probably 27, and I was like in 8th grade or 7th grade. And so art has always like been a motivator for me. It gave me confidence, and yeah, I'm good at something. I wasn't bad at school. I just didn't like school. It was like too structural for me. But I had to be good at it because both my parents are like these geniuses, and I'm their firstborn, only daughters, and I had to put in some work into that. But with art, it was so fluid and easy. But when I moved to the US, I stopped completely for 10 years. I had shown in different places before that, won awards for my art in Jordan and so on. So I just stopped when I was in the US. I don't know, I still don't know why. I think it's a lot of reasons. But one of it is the shock of the United States that shocks you, until you're going to the place where culture is. So maybe you're not good enough. And then you don't see the culture. So you're like, if I'm not good enough for this, then what good am I? يعني خلاص, it destroys your self-esteem or the story that you want to tell. And then, after 10 years, all of the things that happened to me in the United States and how things accumulated got me back to painting eventually.
The Arab in the imagination of the American and in the cultural production of the American is the most maligned people.
No, really?
So it definitely hurts, and the confidence, ability to think of ourselves when you are immersed in this suffocating whiteness, imperialist suffocating whiteness. And then you move to St. Louis and you found, I guess, camaraderie in the overwhelming non-whiteness that is St. Louis and Ferguson.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, obviously when I went to the US, it was like I had nothing in my mind about the United States other than propaganda. They raised us. My generation was definitely raised by. We were talking yesterday with friends. We were raised by Hollywood and sitcoms and all of these things. So whatever we know about the US is like whatever they were trying to sell us. And so when I went to St. Louis, I didn't know what St. Louis was, but I was like anything but Wichita, Kansas, because that's when I first landed, and I'll go anywhere. And then I lived in St. Louis, and it was like shocking like visually shocking, and black neighborhood, white neighborhood, black neighborhood. And I grew up in Amman, and Amman doesn't have that kind of segregation, and I thought the US should not ever have that segregation, right? Because they're like the free world and the American dream. But it took me 8 years. I lived on a college campus neighborhood, really nice house with a fence and a front yard and a backyard. But I'm feeling in my heart, something is wrong. I'm not doing as good at my job as I used to in Jordan. I'm not making close friends. It's all very superficial and مسطح, it's just flat. And I thought it's because I miss Amman so much, I'm not giving the US a chance. Until 8 years into my stay in the US, in 2014, August 2014, Mike Brown was shot in Canfield in Ferguson, which is 20 minutes away from where I used to live. And that's when I started reading about the prison industrial complex as an evolution of slavery, Jim Crow, and then it became the prison industrial complex. That's when I started reading Frantz Fanon. That's when I also became more interested in reading Quran, the spiritual, philosophical stories that Quran have. And that's when I also met people on the ground, and the people that are more similar to me than anyone I've ever met in those whole 8 years. Like, just as an example, in one of the protests after Mike Brown was shot, Allah yarhamu, and Mike Brown was 18 years old. He was preparing himself to go to college, but instead he was shot 8 times and then left in the heat of August in St. Louis for 4.5 hours in front of his apartment complex for everyone to see him decompose right in front of them. So if
Very Israeli of them.
very, and we later found out, the gas that they were shooting at the protesters was made in Israel.
And the training of all of these American police officers, I almost said soldiers, which they are,
They
occupation
are,
soldiers
they're
in those
militarized
cities. Yeah.
police, yeah. And they're trained by them, and their gases are done. So without us even talking, Black and Palestinians, without us even talking, there is like a foundation that I can build on. And now I understand the story, even though I don't understand what is the prison industrial complex or Jim Crow at this point, or the United States for that matter. But one of the things that happened is we were in one of the protests, and this Black woman next to me is from Jennings, which is the neighborhood next to Ferguson. She was like, I haven't been to Ferguson for so long, even though my mom lives here. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, Jennings is literally one street away. She was like, but you understand, white police are basically colonizing Ferguson. Every time you want to enter Ferguson, they'll give you a ticket. And she's like, I have 2 jobs. I'm a single mom with 2 jobs. And basically everything I make is going towards the tickets. And sometimes it's the light, sometimes it's the break. They come up with whatever excuse they want. So she was like, it became so expensive for me to visit my mom, who's 1 street away. That was automatic for me. أنا Palestine, I can see it from any mountain in Amman, not even like closer to the border. I can see it, and it's so close yet so far away.
Yeah, you can see the lights of Jerusalem from the Salt Mountains. Yeah.
And it also taught me something so important. Black communities taught me something so important that I was missing in my analysis, is that where I grew up, we come from communities. Like even when I was born in Oman, which is still exile, even when I lived in Amman, which is still exile, but we do live in communities. If you fall, someone will pick you up, someone will take care of you, someone will visit you. But the US is an individualistic community. It wants you to be an individual. It glorifies the individuality so that if you fall, you will only depend on the system. Therefore, you'll always be enslaved to the system. Black people that I met on the streets, not in the organizing spaces, they're 2 different paths that they're working on. As people that I met on the streets came from communities. That's why it was so easy for me to understand when they talk about their mother, about their grandmother, the maternal spaces that they share, and we are like that too. So yeah, I did find camaraderie, but كمان uprisings are very complicated, way beyond my understanding at the time.
I think a lot of people here in our region don't understand those details, and are still kind of immersed in the propaganda of what is America. It's very hard for them to imagine the Black community's suffering and struggles and revolutionary work and path. In this moment of the uprising in Ferguson, the community that you were with, the Palestinian community, and this Black community of Ferguson coalesced together. And tell us about this experience of cross-pollination and cross-education that must have happened.
The beginnings of uprisings, from my personal observation, they start with something really, really real, like something that people actually need, until the system figures out a way to dismantle it. And I think it was so organic and very natural at the very beginning of Ferguson for them to reach out to Palestinian comrades who have organized with them. We worked on a boycott campaign a few months before Ferguson happened, a few months before Mike was killed. It was a boycott campaign against a company called Veolia, Israeli-French company that used to make it so easy for the settlements to get up very easily in Palestine on illegal stolen land. And they were coming to St. Louis, and when we did research, we found out that every single city that they have got in the United States, they have done incredibly awful things. Like sometimes there's gasoline in the water, sometimes there's sewage in the water. What happened in Flint, Michigan, where the kids were having cancers and different kinds of diseases, was because of the water, and Veolia was the company behind it. And so a coalition was created at the time. It started with the Palestine Solidarity Committee, but then it was like Black folks and environmental folks. It became a really big coalition at the time. And we considered that we won when Veolia pulled out their contract that they were trying to have at the city. And that was the first divestment that ever happened in the United States, run by a group of Palestinian activists and allies and so on. And so when Ferguson happened, they called out for us, and I was like, I have to show up for them the way they showed up for me. And I thought maybe I spoke with some of the folks that we were organizing with, and let's get some friends from Chicago, Palestinian friends from Chicago, and introduce them to Black activists in St. Louis in my backyard. It's like an informal meeting, and let's figure out, and how do we stand up for Black folks in this moment. And so something was created, like we came up with an idea, something called the Palestine contingent within Ferguson, and then later it became Ferguson to Palestine. It wasn't because we were like great people and we created that. It was already because youth in Gaza were reaching out to youth in Ferguson, telling them how to protect themselves from the gas canisters that was shot at them. That was so organic. يعني شباب Gaza, they did that on their own.
I remember those posts,
exactly.
And then they drove the Zionists crazy.
Insane.
Yeah.
And I remember in one of the meetings, one of the guys from Ferguson, he was like, "What is the Gaza? Why do these people love us so much?" And so we felt like, we have to do something that, since the connection is already there, and then you go to on the streets of Ferguson in front of FPD. Black folks are carrying two flags. One is for Palestine, the other one is for Dome of the Rock. فإنه you have to like rise up to the moment. And that's when the Palestine contingent was created. هلا I'm a graphic designer. I've never organized in the US. I come from Amman. I don't understand the United States systems of oppression. I grew up watching Friends and Saved by the Bell. Our slavery is over. Everything's fine. So when the big mobilization happened in October, 2 months after the uprising, the politics started to become so clear. Now, even though I didn't understand it, like I said, but it was so obvious to me, because there was like a conversation about who is going to speak on behalf of the Palestine contingent. And I'm like, I don't want to, but I also don't want this person or that person or that person, because I'm the one who's going to stay on the streets of Ferguson after the lights are off. I'm the one who's going to be on the streets. And I know the problem with each and every one of them, from the Palestinian community and the allies of them. Anyway, eventually I ended up speaking on that stage. And there was like the positive and the negative to it. Like I was pulled in both directions, where Black youth on the streets would stop me and be like, "We see you, we love you, we hear you, we love Palestine." And they're just like, wherever I go, I'm like protected and I'm with them. And there is the opposite side of it, where the institutions of the United States, which is in like a big war with the oligarchy of the United States, they at the time were like the power system. They either want to use me and put me on videos with people I don't know, but eventually I'll find out, those are very problematic people, or they want to fire me from my job. And that's what eventually happened. I ended up getting fired from my job and became unhireable anywhere else, in St. Louis. And it kind of became dangerous for me to be there, because I got these subtle threats everywhere. And on a personal level,
and you weren't the only Palestinian activist that got threats or eventually were targeted from the crew that was working on Ferguson in Palestine.
No, but Bassem Masri, حبيبي الله يرحمه. Bassem, he was born and raised in the US, so he knew better than me. I worked through the institutions. Bassem didn't. Bassem basically just got his camera out from his phone and started live streaming. Live streaming was not a thing at the time, yani it was so new. Because he didn't know what to do, and he was like he lived with black roommates who were on the street, so he went out with them and he started live streaming. Because he saw that mainstream media, from Fox to CNN, are framing it as thugs creating chaos on the streets. And he's like, "La, this is not what's happening." So he started live streaming, and he became a power for them to reckon with. Can you imagine, like, with all of their productions and all of their analysts, and one man with a phone and a camera has like hundreds of thousands of people following him to really know what's happening on the street. And that's how I met Bassem. I met him on the street, and he was my baby brother. And Bassem, after Ferguson, was found dead.
In his car, is that correct?
On a bus. لأنه he couldn't drive anymore. لأنه after Ferguson, people who like had their heart in the right place either got bought out or killed or prosecuted socially. Like Bassem went through all of them. They tried to buy him out. They failed. He tried to find a job after that. They wouldn't let him drive or hire him. Nobody from the community protected him because they thought he was like too much. And then he eventually was found dead. And then the institution that tried to do the same with all of us, a few years after Ferguson, decided to write a study about it so that it becomes the history. It becomes the story that is told about Ferguson.
Palestine and Ferguson.
Palestine and Ferguson and Palestine. And there were studies that were published in Palestinian study journals, they're Palestinian based, by black activists and Palestinian activists. There would be 10 pages of studies titled Ferguson to Palestine, without a single black or Palestinian activist from the ground mentioned in it, including D. Seals, who was Bassem's friend, who was found in his car, dead in his car. They said he committed suicide. He had a bullet in his head in a burning car, so, And then Bassem after that. So including those two were not mentioned in a study titled Ferguson to Palestine.
Yeah, this is a story that repeats in the diaspora. Those who want to academize the revolutionary work while stripping it of any revolutionary footprint. It reminds me, obviously, there was a lot of books even written about Palestine in Canada, Palestine in the US, activism, blah,
it was
blah.
hot.
And there was no mention of the shutdown of Netanyahu at Concordia or the student activism or any of those names. And people make their careers in these liberal arts milieus that get all the money from the big foundations and the Gulf think tanks and what have you. So it is very important that we hear these stories from you as a person that was on the ground. At the end of, there was a moment before you left Ferguson and San Luis where there was a troupe of black artists and black revolutionaries that were sent down to Palestine. That was part of the work that you did? No?
I wasn't even called for that one. It might be هلا I'm walking on eggshells when I say that, but one of the people who wrote the 10-page study was one of the black men who were sent to Palestine. And then after that, he became like the speaker on behalf of all Palestinians. He learned a couple of Arabic words and had a oud behind him. And ended up writing, after that study, he ended up writing a book with a white Zionist man where Palestine is referred to as Judea and Samaria. And in that book, if I remember, I'm paraphrasing here, but something was said, and Zionists have done for Palestinians more than Palestinians have done for themselves. So basically, they got a black man to perpetuate white narratives.
Yes. I mean, whites helped liberate the blacks from slavery.
Exactly.
Without that.
Exactly.
You see, this is exactly what I was trying to get you to throw out there. Obviously, somebody who has money to send this group out decided to take the moment to divert the direction of the movement and co-opt it into these liberal positionalities. So all of this direct on the ground work and sacrifice to help these both our communities, Black and Palestinian, at the end of it, felt very poisonous because of the entry of all of these liberal careerists, and you decided to pack up and go to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And where did you find your salvation?
To the Bay Area, painting.
So tell us about that moment
Yeah.
of returning to painting.
Yeah, none of the people who knew me in St. Louis, in every capacity, whether it was professional or like organizing or even on a personal level from my neighbors, ever knew that I painted. I never mentioned it. And also, like and when I was in school, like in college, we were learning about the history of art. All of these white artists, men, and I can't compare to these legends, you know. But my mom was always the one behind, and why have you stopped painting? And whenever she would visit me in the US, I'd take her to museums and we'd go see Rembrandt or Goya, and she'd stand in front of the paintings. I'm explaining the structure and I'm excited about the painting. And I can't believe I'm looking at this. And she's like, I don't understand it. And so I kept it in my head. And if I ever go back to painting, I'm going to work on something that my mom would understand and that my daughter would understand. But I was like, oh, when am I going to go to painting? Until the Bay Area, يعني. هلا I thought at the time, I am leaving the empire to go to the free world. I didn't understand. It was like I'm going to the heart, to the alleys of the palaces of the decision-making process for the empire.
Yeah, you were leaving the deep south.
Yes.
Where the wound of slavery is wide open.
Clear.
And going into the bubble
Liberals.
of San Francisco that likes to call itself liberal.
The liberal value system where there are ERGs, employee resource groups for everyone. But they can't do a Muslim ERG because then other people want other, it became even more and more complicated. And in a way, I'm grateful for my ignorance at the time, because that's where I learned the majority of things that I knew about the United States and also about myself. Anyway, I decided to go back to painting because of like personal struggles that I went through that were remnants also of this past year in Ferguson and everything before it. And also right before Ferguson happened, it was my first visit to Palestine too. I have an American passport now and I can go back. And that visit, it changes you in so many different ways. Kind of like we were saying about the tashia of the Sayyed. And this is leaving a big impact on you. You just need time to figure out how deep that impact is. And so now that I've seen Palestine, I've seen what I have in this world that has been taken away from me. And I've seen the institution, how vicious it was. And I don't want to fight with these people. I want to fight with people on the streets. So I also have bills to pay at the same time. And let me have an internal conversation just for a minute. And the only way I knew how to, I went back to my roots, is I put at a very small notepad because I didn't know if I could still paint or not. And I got ink because I've always liked how water talks to ink. And my very first painting, when it was done, I was like, oh, I guess I still know how to paint. And by the way, that very first painting was the one that showed in Montreal when we met in 2017. That was the first time we met in Montreal.
When I
And
saw your paintings, just I'm sorry to cut you off there for a second. I thought, uh, people that know painting would understand that working with watercolors is one of the most difficult methods of painting. So it definitely takes patience and
courage,
courage,
more than
right?
anything.
Right. And so, and you, before we got here, we were just chit chatting about it, and you said watercolors take you where they want to take you in the painting. So sorry to cut you off there.
No, it's true though. Like, if you think about it, no, I studied the Torah, the Bible, and the Quran. The Quran was the most, the one I could understand the most because it was still in its original language, and it's a language that I spoke. But I was studying the word ruh, spirit, in all three books. And they all meant the same thing in all three books, and it's the ma'rifah, it's the ilm. It's divine knowledge, basically. What kind of spirit does one leave behind? It could be a spirit of destruction and death and wars, or it could be a spirit of healing and knowledge and wisdom. And so when you think about ink in of itself, it's the beginning of us as humanity starting to document the spirit of our people. It's how we got access to this knowledge. It's not only for the elite where they can hire the writers. Now we can photocopy Franz Fanon and read it, even if we didn't have the money to buy the actual book, or even if they banned the book like they did in the 50s and 60s. So this medium has so much wisdom that I cannot tell it what to do. It has to also tell me. I have to be okay with the idea to let it take me where it needs to go, because it's very strong. بس هلا it's on the opposite side of it is the water, where like water is everything. It's the reason for life. And how water brings this ink, this rigid, scary ink that is so strong and so knowledgeable, it makes it so soft and romantic. All you have to do is just find a story that you really want to tell and let it guide you through it. And that's what happened over the years, is that painting, after I tried to like work with the institutions and I tried to work in Silicon Valley, I was leading brand teams for it, but painting was the only thing that got me closer to the people that I wanted to meet in this world. Like one of the paintings that I did in 2022, right after I came back to Amman, I wanted to go to Palestine and pray in Dome of the Rock. And after the prayer and everything, I stood from far away looking at it, and I looked at the skies and I saw lights. And I took a picture and I said, when I go back to Amman, I want to paint these lights. And then last year, when Iran sent the musayyarat over to hit
Yeah,
Israel.
the drones, yeah, during Truthful Promise,
Yes.
1 and 2.
After the assassination of Am Ismail, someone had taken a picture from that precise angle, and the lights in the sky were the musayyarat, and that was 2 years later.
Wow.
So it's like, if you let the ink take you on this journey, if you're brave enough to let it take you on the journey, and if you are rooted in the right things, it will not only bring you closer to people that think like you, but also you can tell stories that will be considered as prophecies, but they're just rooted in truth, in no belief system, in no everything's going to be fine eventually. So that's why I love ink so much.
And you have this iconic touch of gold in your paintings. Why did you choose that?
When I first started, I only started with black ink. بس بعدين one day I painted. I was having a rough day at work, yo. It was a rough day. I was so tokenized at work. I was so good at it, but they thought, maybe because she's like brown, they want to do her, maybe because she's pretty, yeah, whatever. Maybe it's because of her accent. So I went back home and I painted a woman holding a book. It's one of the studies is Arab women smile. It's like women that the colonizer has taken pictures of them that were degrading. And I wanted to paint them again as their granddaughter and give them tools of power. So she had a book in her hand and she was giving the middle finger. And I thought to myself, there's no way this book is black or white. It has to be golden. So I went down to the shop and I looked for gold ink. And that's how gold entered. And then after that, I started doing the Palestine study. And the Palestine study, I started with the martyrs. And the more you learn about them, the more you think to yourself, "Inna ya ammi, wallah, we are gold." So it started entering the paintings of the martyrs. بس كمان هذا عم بحكي لك all of this is the spiritual aspect of it. بس كمان on the physical aspect of it is إنه when you hang it in a room, it keeps changing as the light hits it. But even if I'm far away from it, it just keeps changing. So that's why. هلا during the genocide last year, especially at the beginning of it, I couldn't find gold in my paintings. I could only see blood. And so I just let it guide me. And so a lot of the paintings that are in the Gaza chapter in this book, they're red.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is your first book collection of your art, and it also includes kind of spoken word, poetry, essay style with each painting. So I feel like it's the first time I see you concentrating on the word also, not only on the painting. Why did you decide to make this merger? And how does it feel coming out with these words when you always were used to just painting those feelings?
One of the things that is asked of artists generally for them to get a funding so that they can do a show is that they have to do a proposal so that if the proposal is accepted, the money is sent. And I think that's one of the reasons, one of many reasons why I didn't paint all these years and no, I don't know. No, I'm painting what I'm feeling now and then tomorrow I'm gonna feel something else and it's gonna accumulate into something eventually, but I don't know. فهلا أنا years into my paint, I stopped for 10 years, but then كمان I started painting for 5 or 6 years later after I went back to painting. I realized إنه I'm studying something. I'm not painting to like show. I'm not an artist who's showing off. Like I am using the medium that I know how to work with to learn something. So the first thing that I worked, the very first painting I worked on, I was talking about, it's titled The Study, the small pads that I told you about. They were titled 3 Miscarriages and a Divorce. It was my personal journey. And it was so difficult for me to talk about it at the time. So I just painted it without any words, except for the very last study. I did write a study. It was the first study that I like, what does it mean? And how do we reconcile all of this pain, personal pain? That is also part of the collective, it happened because of the collective and then it becomes the collective. And then after that, when I started studying الكتاب الحكيم, دراسة في القرآن, some of the things I learned from Quran, because it's the first time I'm listening to it outside of structure, someone telling you لا حرام, ولا it's not right. And I'm just listening to it. I'm listening to Mother Mary say, يا ليتني مت قبل هذا وكنت نسيا منسيا, إنه she was feeling deep sadness like me. Musa was feeling anxiety and fear. Because we always thought of them like, they're untouchable and so far away, kind of like Palestine from Jordan. And then they say things that you are feeling in this moment and you're like, so they're my ancestors. Those are my ancestors. And so I wanted to write some of these stories so that I don't forget them because they're so vast and so beautiful. طبعا as soon as I started writing, my leftist friends were like, shoo, we didn't know you were so religious. And my religious friends were like, what do you know about Quran? And my mom was like, aren't you scared? And like different people had different opinions about it. But أنا إنه I can't worry about all of that. I really need this study for myself. So I created a very small page on Instagram, like away from my personal one, so that I can share them. And then over the years, I studied martyrs. I didn't want to forget their stories. As someone who works in propaganda, I mean, or like we create art, we create, I mean, ads in advertising or B2B. You know how important the story is for a corporation that you're working in. And now, because a corporation has actually no product at all, not a very good CEO, but it's your job to make it look like it's like the best thing after sliced bread, you know? And then you have all these stories of martyrs. Like one of the paintings I did was this young man in Jenin, and someone had filmed them from the second floor. The woman had covered him in blankets and was like just patting his shoulder, يعني just طبطب عليه. She's saying مع السلامة يما, goodbye son. And I'm like, Ya Allah, our moms have lost so much. And then we find out she's not his mom. She's a woman who lives in the building who didn't want him to die alone or cold. When have you ever seen someone tell these stories about us? They're just telling you 5 Palestinians were killed here, 5 Palestinians, this city was invaded. But there's like tafsil, there are more to the story that is not being told. And it becomes the responsibility of the artist to tell that story. And I don't want to forget them. I don't want to forget them more than anything. So that's why I'm not calling them anything other than a study. I'm studying us. I'm studying the martyrs. I'm studying Quran. I'm studying patriarchy. Because feminism has destroyed the way we communicate. It isolated us from each other.
White feminism.
White feminism.
Yes. I mean,
and also بس ما هو كمان liberal feminism. It's like it's
which is
it's contagious.
a bleached kind of feminism. We have our Palestinian feminist icons like Layla Khalid.
Layla Khalid is not a feminist. She's a radical fighter.
Yes, but
not just a feminist.
For us, the word feminism doesn't mean the negation of masculinity and manhood.
Never.
But the equality of those two precious poles of a society.
It's a spiritual pursuit. It's not a material pursuit. White feminism, which became really contagious, became about equal pay. It's about something material. Now we're talking about communities. How do you build communities? How do you protect each other? It's a system of protection, not a system of oppression. And because we're colonized people, it turns into a system of oppression. So how do you deal with that when they are giving you funds to talk about it only from an equal pay perspective? It becomes like comparing apples to oranges. It's nothing that we need in our communities. But that's what I was trying to study all this time. And whenever something new happens, I start studying it. This book is the first book that I print because I felt that's the story where I found the majority of the answers. Where I still have so many questions, but some of the answers that were very clear for me came from the martyrs, from the paintings of the martyrs, and people like Layla Khalid and Shadi Abu Ghazali and this woman that said مع السلامة يما.
Dalal Mughrabi and others.
Dalal Mughrabi, yeah. Ghassan, Naji, Walid Daqqa, Basil Al-Araj. I worked for 8 years documenting these stories, and social media started deleting accounts for me. And the accounts, you can rebuild accounts, you've lost accounts, you know how it's like. But the archive of it, you use this page not for propaganda, you're using it as an archive, like when was this painted and what was the study, and so much was lost. And on October 7, لحظة العبور, that I painted that 3 seconds later, I got banned. I felt like I need to first of all have sovereignty over my art. So I need to print it outside of funding or even publishing houses. And I need to print it. I need to go back to print because social media is temporary and vicious.
So it wasn't easy to get this published. Obviously, because you are a radical revolutionary artist with all this principle, positionality, and you're principled in the art form, but also you're principled in the feeling of that and the politics of it. How hard is it? Explain to us a little bit about how hard it is to publish something like this, and maybe end it on telling us what do you think you can give as guidance to new artists that are coming into this field, want to do something that is meaningful to their communities and societies, and are faced with these limitations.
Yeah, about how difficult it is, it's difficult but not impossible. It's necessary. يعني the necessity of it becomes your pat on the shoulder, and no matter how difficult this is going to be. هلا في the spiritual difficulty of it إنه this I spent 2 years working on this, بس كمان when it became closer to an end كانت genocide was happening in Gaza. On a personal level, I'm destroyed. Like, they're killing us with no mercy. Like, just wiping us out. They hate us so much. There's so much hate. I went to my mom and I was like, because my mom was the one who like really wanted this to get off the ground. And she's like, do it for me the whole time. I'm like, no, nobody's gonna care about it. I don't know. It's like a lot of responsibility. She's like, do it for me. And I'm like, خلاص لعيونك يما. But then I went to her one day and I'm like, Mama, they're killing us anyway. And خلاص, we're dead. We're gone. What difference does it make? And she was like, she told me a hadith that I can't remember, but she was saying basically, Muhammad says, even if it's like Armageddon Day, and you have a little plant it. You never know when the season will come. And that made a lot of sense to me. And okay, I'm gonna put it out there and see what's gonna happen. From a material perspective, كمان it's very difficult. Like, it costs a lot of money to be able to get these projects off the ground. And usually what people do, it's easier if you like apply for a fund or go to a publisher or, have a political path that someone wants to fund this for it. Well, I'm neither one of these things. I did apply for a fund because I thought this was an Arab-speaking fund. I just got back. I'm exploring like what are the possibilities. But that fund, it's a long story. And we'll talk about it later. But I found out one of the biggest fund for Arab-speaking artistic projects and culture is actually funded by a well-known Zionist and the European Union.
The Soros Foundation.
The Soros Foundation. What do we expect if our culture, our art, everything that we are, everything that is platformed at least, is coming from these people? فبعديها I decided I'm gonna do it on my own. But how am I gonna come up with the money? I run a studio in Amman. It's called Studio Jenin. It's a gallery for all of my studies.
Jenin, of course, is your daughter.
Jenin is my daughter. الله يخلينا بناتنا. مرسم Jenin is the bridge. It's the place where everyone from everywhere can meet and talk, because they've isolated us so much and جهلونا, turn us into ignorant people. And so now we talk with each other on a personal level. We make شاي ومرمية. The مرمية, I have it from Jenin, one of the martyrs that I painted. His mom called me and thanked me for the painting that I sent her. She was like, let me send you something from Jenin. I'm like, no. She's like, I'm gonna send you something anyway. قلت لها if necessary, إذا ما فيها غلبة, send me some مرمية. And I didn't want to use the مرمية alone. So whenever we have these gatherings, we send a prayer to the shuhada and we drink مرمية from Jenin.
And miramiya is sage in English, but also it's the word is Maryamiya.
Maryamiya.
The Mary's
Mother Mary used to drink it whenever she has pains in her stomach. فكمان هيك it's so beautiful. This مرسم is a space that's already existing. I have to pay rent for it and get it off the ground without any tamwilat, funding and all of that. And now I have this book. So I was like, okay, I'll have the Marsam, my studio, Jineen, becomes the publisher of this book, and I'll figure it out. And I did end up figuring it out. Like I said, we come from communities. We're not individuals. Communities help you stand on your feet. Someone from Canada, Habibna Saeed, he was like, I fundraised for you. I'm like, did I ask you to fundraise for me? He's like, la, but I knew you were not going to ask anyway, so I just did it. My mom helped me by selling a piece of land, the one piece of land that she had. She sold it and gave me some money to do it. And the people that did the editing for the book and the people who printed the book either refused to be paid for it because they believe in the project so much, or they gave me a huge discount so that I'm able to do it. So I did it. And then after that, like we were saying a little bit ago, I got invited to like the usual suspects, Britain and Germany. And I was like, how am I supposed to read the stories of the martyrs at the heart of the empire?
The land of Balfour or the land of the Nazis.
Yeah, no. I worried a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, but this is where you get exposure. Da 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 da. طلع إنه a week later I got an invitation to go read in Baghdad, and I was scheduled to have a reading here in Beirut, and I had the reading in my studio. So it worked out. It's difficult but not impossible. And my advice to everyone is they have to figure out what are they good at and do it. لأنه we can no longer depend on all of these places. And like what happened with the US aid, overnight they'll cut you off and then you're on your own without knowing who you really are, what you really want in this world.
Well, this is definitely a very beautifully designed, beyond your art and words. The team, مشكورين, they're very thanked on.
I did the design.
Yes, the design and the layout is beautiful. The paintings are, it's impossible not to love every page of this book. And clearly you can see the heart in this. This is Hay Sheikh Jarrah, very famous for the attempted and continued ethnic cleansing. Ismail Haniyeh. And there's so much. Suhad Khatib, Study on Truth, and people can buy it online.
Yes.
Where can they buy it?
It's from my website, suhadkhatib.com, and it's also available in Bayt al-Jamal in Baghdad, and it's available in Barzakh in Beirut, and it will soon be available in Amman. Inshallah, I'll send the information soon.
Inshallah. Suhad, thank you very much for giving us your time. We wish you the best, and we recommend everybody to go to your website to buy this book. You are still watching Free Palestine TV, Wartime Cafe. Until we meet next time, we ask you to go to our website, freepalestine.video, donate, join all our socials, share the content, and until we see you next time, we bid you all a free Palestine.